Well, what a beautiful week we are set to have here in St. Paul. 90 years of history we've been doing this. We're going to pay out over $600,000 this week. The biggest 4th of July rodeo. 90 years we've been doing this. Welcome to the Cowboy Countdown, your inside pass to the riders, the picks, and the pulse of St. Paul. I'm Carter McKillip. This is my senior project hosted here. Really like to thank the St. Paul Rodeo for letting me host this, and I'm going to get this thing started. Well, my guest for today's show, he's the president of the St. Paul Rodeo Foundation, the 2025 Hall of Fame inductee. I'd like to welcome Kevin Smith to the stage. Man, what a week we're going to have here.
It is a big one. Once again.
So Kevin's here. He's going to help us learn about the history of the rodeo, and maybe we'll all learn something new today.
I hope so.
So let's talk about, how did the St. Paul Rodeo begin? What got it started?
There is a little bit of a mix-up about the years. I won't get too deep in that area, but in 1935, several of our relatives and a few others went and put on a little something like a rodeo in Mount Angel, not far from here, just east of the freeway. And they decided it worked pretty well. And so they came back here the next year in 1936, was really the first year that a rodeo happened in here during the 4th of July holiday.
Is it true that the founders of the rodeo supplied all the bucking stock for the performances?
Well, I think most of it. All events that we see today weren't happening then. Maybe half, and they didn't need as much bucking stock, but a lot of the horses came from William Smith, the original generation of Smiths here. You and I, as we were just talking, are connected to a lot of the beginning of this rodeo. Carter himself has two great grandpas that were founders of this rodeo, Morris Smith and John G. McKillip. I have a grandpa, Carl J. Smith, two of his brothers, Morris and Bill, and also my great uncle on my mother's side, Raymond Egg. So I come by it both ways there.
Yeah, you talk about the tradition and the way it passed through families. Talk a little bit about that. You know, how it moves on, like you say, the board of directors, even today. It's passed on. You got grandparents or even parents that used to be, and now it's passing on to their kids.
It does. Every once in a while we get the feeling on the board, I was there for some years, that somebody might get nervous when they see the Smith name showing up so often. Well, in many cases, even yet today, the name may not be there, but the mother might have had that name. There's always that, you know. If you start counting, you might be low. But it is something that you grow up with. You know, I was involved through all my childhood, I guess. I said one time, maybe in something that we wrote while I was on the board, that as soon as I could reach the telephone at home down here on Blanchett Avenue, when our telephone number was 393, back in those days, I was answering rodeo calls, helping out, you know, at home. I really didn't know that I would land on the board because I saw so much of it. As much as I enjoyed it growing up, I thought maybe that was going to be enough. Odd in my case that Dave Smith, current president of the rodeo, you never really know how things will happen. His boys were growing up and doing lots of things and involved in athletics and you name it. So he decided he needed to be away from the board for a bit. And when I heard that, I said, well, this could be a chance. He was the secretary of the rodeo board at that time, and that was a fit for me. So I decided to run for it. The rest is history, John, as they say.
So this community, it comes together so well to put on this event. So I believe it was in 1962, they had the windstorm, took down the grandstands, I believe, or just talk about how the cyclone windstorm affected.
Well, it was one of the bleachers that went completely down. I can't tell you right now if it was F or G, but we had to rebuild it. So we always call that the Columbus Day Storm. Some of those names have been changed to protect the innocent now, but I still remember it as Columbus discovered America. And I know it was a Friday, and I know that cousin Neil Smith and I were going to the movie in Salem with my folks, and we got as far as Egan Gardens on River Road, just before Brook Lake Road, and we couldn't go any further because all those big oak trees were across the road. We turned around and came home. My mother decided we needed to get a few groceries at Punker and Bernard's store, and we went inside there where the old cars are now, just in time for that whole wall of glass to come in. All those windows blew in while we were in the store, and got the car in the detached garage at home just in time for an oak tree to fall over the top of that garage on Bruce's side of the road now, over the top of one of my dad's black Fords that I got to wash about twice every week.
So you talk about like the community coming together. Talk about maybe a little more on how different rodeo committees, or even you make the connections along the way going to different rodeos, and by hosting your own rodeo, bringing people in. Talk about like the connections that you could make from that.
It's kind of a whole separate culture. Once you're on a rodeo committee any place, I think we understand a lot of things about how it works other places. And I suspect that most people that come here think that there are a lot more paid personnel than there really are. All of this board, it's an active board. We work, well, I used to. The ones that are active now work every day for nothing. It's all total volunteer position. We have a good office staff now that we pay, of course, a good wage. But we know when we visit another rodeo, which we like to do, to find out what they're doing, and maybe there's something there that we could learn from, we take really good care of each other. Everybody rolls out the red carpet for another rodeo committee because we know they're working their butts off all year long to put on their own rodeo. The Diamond Club over here that some people don't really understand, underneath the new Section F bleacher, was put together really partly for that purpose. Partly to serve our bigger sponsors and most any sponsors that want to go in there and visit and watch the rodeo and have a drink, but also our visiting rodeo committees because they take such nice care of us. It's kind of a scratch your back and I'll scratch mine, I'll scratch yours. No more scratching.
What's it like getting to be the president of the nation's biggest 4th of July rodeo at one point?
It almost happens by accident if you stay long enough. My dad and I, so most of the folks in here I think today know that we all have these generations behind us. It so happened that my dad lasted in his secretary position for 46 years. And I probably used to think that Gene Smith wasn't the most tolerant person I knew until I got on the rodeo board for a little while. And then I kind of understood that you have to try your best to get along with everyone. It came time where I had an opportunity to be on the president side for a minute. I did that for 2 years. The board, while my dad was here, decided that it would be nice if he would sit in the president's chair for 1 year, which he did. We have a couple perks around here in this system. You know, if you've been a past president, you might get invited to another meeting or some extra things, or there's a little dinner that goes on after the annual board meeting in the wintertime, and the past presidents get invited, which is kind of sweet. But all of the people that we work with here are doing the same thing and volunteering. I think that the board now really, in the last 2 or 3 years, since I've been active there, is beginning to do a much better job than we did keeping the entire membership posted on everything that's going on. It's kind of hard to do that. When you sit in a board meeting 2 times every month, you kind of feel like everybody must know what you know. And I already can tell from being away from it for 2 years that that's not true at all. Because there's stuff going on like this show right now that I didn't really know about. It didn't cross my plate until about the last minute that I knew very much about it. It's a different part of life. In my family, Some of you folks know Auntie Ann, know my grandmother best as Auntie Ann. She was grandma to me. But she came from a culture where she preferred to volunteer and work outside of the home. She didn't want to clean the house or cook or clean. She wanted to be involved with the courts and the juvenile delinquent department and the Red Cross and the rodeo. They say that, I wasn't here for all this, they say that she was the chairman of most every rodeo committee in the beginning and helping out those men that were just putting on the rodeo itself. So I think when it's in your blood, maybe you can't ever get rid of it. I suppose you have something of the same feeling.
Yeah, it's great having, the connections and the family along the way to help you get through this, and I don't know, it's just great. The feeling of all these people coming together to build a strong rodeo like this, it's awesome.
Let me just mention, we were talking a little bit about that, and presidents, and there have been 22 presidents of the St. Paul Rodeo since 1936. The first one was the senior Bill Smith, William, Billy's grandpa, and he died very young of a kind of a common Smith heart disease back in those years when doctors and medicine weren't the same. So the rodeo began in 36. He was president only till 38, and I think when he died he was 41 or 2 years old. Right after him came my great uncle Ray Meneg for 16 years. There was no limit on the time you could be president then. And right after Ray was the next long-term president, your great-grandpa, J.G. McKillip. Now what kind of happened, no fault of anyone, is that Meneg and McKillip were about the same age. So since Ray sat in the president's chair for 16 years, and then John McKillip came after him, John got fairly old in that position. And I think that the board just decided with his agreement that it was time to set a policy that if you were going to be president, you only could have 3 consecutive years. And I think it's been a great thing. It gives many more people an opportunity to fill that role. Wally Pulschneider, that most of you knew, that we just lost, that just passed away, is the only man that had 2 separate presidential terms with time in between. So he served a 3-year term, and then we had another president for a short time, and then he came back for another 3. So I guess we must have liked the way he did it.
So it's crazy. Well, I believe actually that the first ever purse of the St. Paul Rodeo was $500, right? Is that correct?
I think that's right. There wasn't much money then, but times were real different, right?
So it's crazy to see now that we're paying out over $600,000. Like, talk about how you do that, how you get to that.
Well, on the one end of it, I think we're pretty proud of what we do here, and we like to be ranked. We like to be ranked high in the PRCA. It had something to do with our induction as a PRCA Hall of Fame rodeo, because we've grown so big. And most all Western people, cowboy people, rodeo people, have heard from somebody. They understand a little bit about St. Paul. Like Flint's been talking about here in his show. You know, you come into this town if you don't live around here, and you can't believe that this big rodeo is going to happen here in a town of 400. I sometimes back away from that a little bit and say that our fire district and our school district is more like 2,000 plus, but that's still a very small number for the rodeo that we have here. And we've been doing very well, as I think everyone knows. You can tell by just a short, easy look around that things have been improved here a lot, so financially, crowd-wise, and I think we also know here that since COVID, if anything was helped by COVID, it's been rodeo. And I don't understand that completely, except to say that Western lifestyle people aren't going to get caught in the basement anymore. They're going to be coming out to something. And you all see how our tickets sell now. It's outrageous. If anything, there's people out there that came to this rodeo for many years that haven't caught on yet, and they're getting stuck outside the gate some of these years, and they're not very happy about it. That's why we don't worry much either about showing it on closed circuit TV. You can come back in here after the rodeo gets going and watch the rodeo right there while you have a cold drink. And that really helps out the people that can't can't get in to sit in the stands.
All right, I gotta ask, whose idea was it to get the arborvitaes in the arena?
Well, the trees started with real trees. You know, we call the arborvitae trees now, but the trees were little fir trees, little Doug fir trees, starts, and they went out and collected them, stole them probably, off of common lands here and there. Some of the directors took a truck out and got a load of them and kept them wet as they might need them during the rodeo. And there came a time, probably around spotted owl time, when we became environmentalists and conservationists and decided that the proper thing would be to do something that we could plant there that might not be dead at the end of the rodeo. And that was about the time that Cousin Brucey was putting together his business, and I'm sure he had a little something to do with the suggestion at the time of the arborvitae. I can't help but remember when you say that. One year I was at the Reno Rodeo and happened to be staying in the Silver Legacy Hotel, and I came for lunch or breakfast, and Trevor Brazil, our new Hall of Famer, was sitting in there by himself having a meal, so I joined him. And we were a little bit sad at the time. We had been doing research on our entrance in this rodeo, and we found that most years we had, let's say, 80 to 90% of the top 20 riders, riding event cowboys, coming to this rodeo, entering and performing, riding in this rodeo. But when it came to timed events, it was under half. And we didn't really understand that, so I just asked him. I said, what's wrong that we can't get more of the leading timed event cowboys at this rodeo? He said, that's very easy, you gotta go back to back. I didn't really understand back to back, but what I had read about it before really threw me off, because I thought that will never work here, because we have the two rodeos on the 4th of July and a parade beforehand. When are we going to have slack on the 4th of July? At 6 a.m. or what? Well, he said, that's easy. You didn't read far enough when you were checking on it. He said the two performances on the 4th will be the back-to-back. For those who don't know, the back-to-back, Justin went through it a little bit during the rodeo last night, means that every contestant coming here in the timed events can perform twice in the same day and be gone to the next rodeo. Used to be when cowboys came to rodeos and they weren't doing as much or traveling as much, they would come here and stay for the week because they might be up once today and once 2 or 3 days from now. Well, they can't do that now, just by the way it works. So we went back to back and made a huge difference in how that worked. And back to the, I got to tie this back somewhere because I'm off on one of those things again, those tangents. The next part of Trevor's story with me that morning was, he said, you know, I really love to bring new cowboys to St. Paul because I terrorize them all the way there in the truck, telling them, you're never going to believe this when we get there because they have trees in the arena. He was making it sound like trees, big trees in the arena. And he said they'd be paralyzed by the time they were there. There were other ropers. How am I going to rope around big trees? Well, that's what it was. And then he showed him when he got here. He also had a little story about that. It's changed slightly. There's a few less arborvitae, you might notice, in the arena than there once were. But used to be, I think it's still sort of the same, that if you get into the trees over in front of Section A and you're a team roper, you're in the right spot. That's how it works, right, for a good time. But if you're a calf roper and you're out here more towards Section C and you're getting into the trees, you're in trouble. You're not going to win a nickel. And that's just something that timed event cowboys know about St. Paul, Oregon.
So we talked about this being a top, I think it's believed top 20 now, rodeo in the PRCA, and one of the biggest over the 4th of July, but it's more than just a rodeo. Talk about how it gives back to the community.
It sure does. That's a great question. On the one hand, what I was thinking when you first started there, Carter, was that we have everything here, all of the makings of a fair, even though we're not a fair. If we were a fair, we would have a couple extra, I hesitate to say problems, concerns, because rodeos that are part of a fair, like Canby, for instance, the rodeo board has to get along with the fair board. That sometimes can become an issue. Here, the rodeo board is pretty well in charge, but we still have carnival rides, music, fireworks, parade, you name it. All the parts. In fact, I have quite a few good friends that don't worry much about getting tickets to go inside the rodeo, especially during years when it was televised. They come for all the fair components. Well, I think that in addition to that, we like the bigger ranking. What was the other part of the question? I knew it was going a different direction.
How does it give back to the community?
Thank you. So, all of the nonprofits in this town mostly are hurt a little bit by the way we like to stay country. And if you're not from Marion County, you may not know that in 1970, Marion County put in some of the strictest zoning anywhere in the United States. Supposedly, we're a top 3 or 4 soil type in the United States of America, and I would say that we're the top 3 or 4 serious zoning challenges for what people might like to do. Well, they wanted to protect the farmland, and they've done that. And I think most all of you know that in Marion County here, if you're outside of the city limits of any of the cities, you can't build a house if you don't have over 80 acres. And that has made a difference. It makes a difference here in this town with the number of people. So we have less people in the schools. We have less people available to run the other nonprofits. But guess what? We like it that way. St. Paul is one of the few small towns, maybe the only one in this part of the world, that has stayed almost the same size that it began. Everything else really develops in a lot of other counties. And, name me another place where you can be 20 minutes from Salem and 30 minutes from Portland and anything that you would ever want, professional sports, concerts, you name it, and still drive home to the country every day or night. It doesn't happen very often. And because of that shortage, we help out all of the other nonprofits. The church, the Catholic school, the school district, the JCs, the you name it. There's probably 5 more. And you all know who they are. And it isn't just the rodeo. Everybody uses this couple of weeks to make all their fundraising. I like to say that we don't have car washes and cakewalks anymore at St. Paul High School or in these schools, because it all happens right here. This is where the fundraising is. And it isn't a gift from the rodeo, it's a need. It's a need for the rodeo. We need all those groups. We need all those kids. In fact, we've used up our local area so much that we get groups to come in here from other cities. We get 4-H clubs and we get school groups that are planning trips abroad or something to come in here and help us, and then they get to do their fundraising as well.
So I'm going to tie that into, you talk about schools a little bit. Let's talk about how the football team, or high school football team, gets to play in this arena.
That's changed 2 or 3 times over the years. I won't get the numbers right. My friend Jay Phillips would get that right if he was here, because he's the one that I knew that knew exactly about that. Of course, the football team here has played 6-man, 8-man, 11-man, back to 8-man. I don't think we went back to 6. Some years they played behind the high school, but many, probably most, they've played in this arena. There was a gap during the time that I was in school here when we played at that field behind St. Paul High School, and we weren't in the rodeo arena during that time. For whatever reason, I can't even say. I wasn't old enough to pay attention or care, maybe, in those days. But it's kind of a payback. We like it. We sometimes call it the Rodeo Dome. I think that there aren't any other high schools this size that get to play football in this kind of arena. And one other little part I should add to that fits with the story is we have a little home field advantage here that no other schools have as well. So if it gets to be about mid or toward the end of the football season and we've had a fair amount of rain, when those visiting kids come in here and slide on it and their mothers get to wash their uniforms when they get home, it smells just like a rodeo. Those of you who've worked on the field understand that.
So it wasn't just a football field, though. At one point it was a baseball field too, correct?
I guess at the very beginning. There are some old scratched up pictures of that. That's what it was right before the rodeo, they say. Surrounded by Scotch broom instead of a fence, an old horrible weed that used to be around here. You know, those things have all changed too. We were talking the other day about berries and how terrific berries are in this part of the world and terrific to eat. I'll never forget the little ditch berries, we called them, that were just as big as the end of your little finger. Well, they're not here anymore either because of Roundup and Crossbow and other things like that. So the fence rows and hedgerows have all been cleaned up. So those kinds of things change. You also remember, I'm sure, because you're a student of this stuff, that when they took the NFR to Texas in 2020, they put it in the baseball stadium, not in the Dallas Cowboys field, because they liked the size and shape. And how they developed that arena and dressed it and staged it was compared to our arena because of the size and the oval shape of it. They needed to put the barrier, the roping box, at one end of the bucking chutes, just like it is here, which is very rare in the rodeo world, but it seems to work for us, so they kind of knew it could work for them.
Well, that's going to wrap up our history segment today. Let's say a big thank you to Kevin.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks, Carter.
As well, it is his birthday too, so happy birthday, Kevin. All right, and our last segment of the day is going to be getting you some nightly picks and stuff to look at in the performance tonight. We're going to start off in the bareback riding. Our matchup of the night is Jess Pope versus Sankey Pro Rodeo's Land of Fancy. Jess Pope's ranked number 10 in the world right now. He was the 2022 world champion, and they matched up together last year in Vegas for 86.5. In the steer wrestling, Landris White, he's number 28 in the world. He made a good run in slack, so I expect something good tonight. In the bull riding, Braxton Whitesell versus Magic Touch from Sankey Pro Rodeo and Phenom Genetics. Tristan Hutchings was 90 on this bull last year to win the St. Paul Rodeo, so that could be a big matchup to look for. In the tie-down roping, Stanfield, Oregon native Gator Goodrich. He was 8.5 in slack, which put him in the 4th place in the first go-round, so that could be big tonight. In the breakaway roping, Martha Angeloni. She got 5th place here last year, and she's top 20 in the world. I think that could be good. In the team roping, it's the Hanson boys, Adrian Oregon and a kid out of Idaho, Clayton and Chase. They're 12.7 in slack, but I expect them to bounce back in the performance tonight. In the saddle bronc riding, this might be the best event of the night. Logan Hay versus Amos Moses from Western Rodeo is our matchup of the night. Number 29 in the world for Logan Hay. Stu Wright was 89 on that horse. That horse was also marked a 47.5 out of a possible 50 in Omak, Washington. Another horse to look at tonight, Caballo Diablo from Western Rodeo. Zach Dallas was 87 on this horse in Reno. Another horse from Western Rodeo, Hippie Mountain. Rusty Wright was 88 on that horse. Another one is Atomic Blonde from Sankey Pro Rodeo and Phenom Genetics. That is an NFR horse in the bareback riding, now getting switched over to the bronc riding, so that could be good. And the final one, Irv's Legacy from Sankey Pro Rodeo and Phenom Genetics. Ryder Wright last week was 91.5 in Reno on this horse to win the short go there. And in the barrel racing, Jordan Driver, number 27 in the world. She won a big check in Houston last winter, so I think that'll be good. And those are your nightly picks. I'd like to say a big thank you to Kevin for coming on the show, and that's going to wrap up our Cowboy Countdown for tonight. We'll see you for Performance 3 tomorrow.